Welcome to Today's Roar, the Detroit Tiger podcast, brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold. About 47 hours before the trade deadline, lots of activity has occurred in the past 4 or 5 days. As of yet, the Detroit Tigers have not made a trade.
All right, it's Evan Petzold, Mark Gorash from post-production. The Tigers have made a trade. Catcher Carson Kelly to the Texas Rangers, which opens up a spot for prospect Dylan Dingler to make his MLB debut. In return, the Tigers have received catcher Liam Hicks and right-hander Tyler Owens from the Rangers. Again, this is a post-production conversation. We made it 50 minutes through, and then the Tigers decided to make a trade on us. But Mark, Liam Hicks, Tyler Owens, the two players coming back, what can you tell us?
Well, Liam Hicks, Double-A catcher, predominantly a bat over defense. He's been playing at Double-A at Frisco, likely go to Erie. Catcher in the Tiger system, Edgardo Alfonso, has had a very, very good year there. Probably gets promoted up to Toledo. Nothing earth-shattering there. Pretty far down the Rangers prospects list. They also received a pitcher, Tyler Owens, originally drafted by the Atlanta Braves in 2019, got a pretty good overslap bonus for a 13th rounder, $545,000, smallish, does have a very good fastball, 94, 97, has touched 99, has had a pretty good year for Texas in Double-A, 2.80 ERA, striking out about 9 per 9, and as I said, pretty fastball heavy. Decent little slider. I'll be excited to hear what Harris and Greenberg have to say about what they did, but had to move on from Carson Kelly. Going to be a free agent. Dylan Dingler's killing it in AAA. Time to see what he can do, and I'm glad they made a deal. I don't think it's earth-shattering.
Yeah, I think it was a spectacular trade from Scott Harris, and just the way that he was able to move Carson Kelly, and not only move him, but target him as somebody that they could fix. Because again, you have to remember Carson Kelly has improved on offense and defense. They picked him up. They had him this year. They picked up that player option to have him around for the 2024 season. And he's done great things for the Tigers. Now he goes to the Rangers. I mean, again, this was a win for the Tigers and for Scott Harris. Just being able to move him and to be able to get two players back. Again, you mentioned like Hicks is 25. He's got a 260 batting average, 4 home runs, 41 walks, 44 strikeouts in 80 games in Double-A Frisco. So sure, like he's a little bit older, but the swing decisions, the contact rates, both are fantastic. He draws mixed reviews defensively, so we'll see if he's able to stick behind the plate. And if he does stay behind the plate, if he's an above average defender or if he is just an average or below average defender, that seems, that remains to be seen. But you do really like the swing decisions and the contact rates. As for Owens, like you mentioned, he's got more vert on the cutter than the sweeper. He's just a reliever right now. Maybe the Tigers feel like they can stretch him out, which I think would be very fascinating if they could stretch him out. But he should be a big league pitcher. That's the thing that you need to know about Owens is this guy is going to pitch in the big leagues, and that's a win. That's a win. If he makes it to the big leagues and he's able to positively contribute, even if it's out of the bullpen, that's a big win. And yeah, Liam Hicks, sure, he might be catcher depth because Eliezer Alfonso has been great. Dylan Dingler is going to move up to the big leagues. Being with the Tigers, it's going to be a tandem of Jake Rogers and Dylan Dingler, which means someone's going to have to come up to AAA Toledo. Now, I know they have Anthony Bemboom there, but Eliezer Alfonso, it only makes sense that he moves up to AAA Toledo. Liam Hicks probably slots in there at the Double-A level to get going. But really, it seems like Tyler Owens is the guy to know in this trade, especially long-term.
Look, I think you and I have said numerous times leading up to the trade deadline, Tigers need to add arms that are probably bullpen arms that have the capacity to throw hard. So I think Tyler Owens fills that bill. Hopefully they'll get a few more, maybe even some that throw harder. But all in all, based upon where they're at, probably a pretty decent return for a guy that's going to be a backup catcher for 2 months.
Yeah, great stuff. Again, Carson Kelly going to the Texas Rangers. In return, the Tigers getting Liam Hicks and Tyler Owens. That's all we have on this trade, but let's get back to the rest of the podcast.
Let's quickly review the week. 3 and 4 week, Evan Petzold. Take us through it.
Yeah, 3-4 week for the Tigers, 2-2 in 4 games against the Cleveland Guardians at Progressive Field, and then 1-2 in 3 games against the Minnesota Twins at Comerica Park. Really, the big news of the week was Riley Greene being placed on the 10-day injured list with a right hamstring strain. We'll talk more about that later in the podcast, but it's his 4th injury in 3 seasons. Not a good sign. Doesn't seem like he's going to be down for long, but still, 4th injury in 3 seasons. It's really tough to see Riley Greene go down. He is the heart and soul of what the Tigers have going offensively when they have something going. But yeah, that's how the week went for the Tigers. A couple divisional opponents that they faced. And then, where you see where they're at in the standings at this point now, it's 12 games back in the American League Central, 5.5 games back for the last wild card spot. The Cleveland Guardians are still up top in the division with a 63-42 record, followed by the Twins at 58-46, the Royals at 57-49, and then the Tigers at 52-55. And don't forget, the Chicago White Sox are there as well at 27-81. They've lost 14 games in a row. It's their second 14-game losing streak this season, which is just horrible. But yeah, that's where the Tigers are at. Like I said, 3-4 week, Riley Greene goes down. But Mark, for now, we have so much we need to get into about the trade deadline, which is scheduled for 6 p.m. Tuesday. The Tigers play a game at 1:10 p.m. on Tuesday. And then less than 5 hours later, the trade deadline hits at 6 p.m.
Question one of the big two. Who are the Tigers that are on the trade block? And what is beat writer Evan Petzold hearing about Jack Flaherty? So let's start with, by far, their most valuable trade piece, Jack Flaherty. Will he be making a start, in the next 2 days, like he's scheduled to do, which I think that there's zero chance that happens. And tell me what you're hearing, who the Tigers have been talking to. You actually wrote a pretty great article with a bunch of hypothetical trades. Let's get into the Jack Flaherty part of this. I actually put out a Jack Flaherty deal that was kind of a plagiarism version of one of your deals. But let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, let's get into the trade story that I wrote after we get into our break. Let's really knock out question one of the big two here, which essentially comes down to what are we hearing about Jack Flaherty? Where are the Tigers at with their pieces that they could trade off? That's what really matters is we're getting closer and closer to 6 p.m. Tuesday. And yeah, Jack Flaherty, he is the guy. He's kind of all but guaranteed to be traded to a postseason contender. That's the plan. The Tigers want to move him. They're shopping him. They're trying to trade him. He's got a 2.95 ERA with 19 walks and 113 strikeouts across 106 2/3 innings in 18 starts. He is pitching like an ace, and he is the best 2-month rental pitcher on the trade block. Might be the best pitcher across the board if the White Sox aren't going to move Garrett Crochet, and the Tigers aren't going to move Tarik Skubal. So Jack Flaherty is right there at the top of everybody's wish list, no doubt about it. He is scheduled to start on Monday for the Tigers against the Cleveland Guardians, coming to town for a 2-game series. We'll see if he makes that start or not. I know the Los Angeles Dodgers have expressed interest. The Houston Astros have expressed interest. The San Diego Padres have expressed interest. Okay, the Tigers have options to make trades here and to move their pieces, but they are believed to have a very, very high asking price in early Jack Flaherty negotiations. One person actually pointed out to me that it's ridiculous asking prices. That's how high the ask is from Scott Harris to these other teams at this point. Now, his ask could come down as we get closer and closer to 6 p.m. on Tuesday, but that makes me wonder, maybe Jack Flaherty is going to make that start on Monday. Here's what we know right now is that he is supposed to start. He is scheduled to start. The Tigers have had a bunch of bullpen games. They need somebody to come in and pitch and give them some length. One evaluator told me that they would be very interested in seeing Jack Flaherty start on Monday to see if he holds his velocity, because there is some concern about the back injury. And that's where this gets complicated and where we can have maybe more of a discussion is, look, Jack Flaherty signed a 1-year, $14 million contract last offseason. There are two things that are impacting trade talks. It's the lower back injury and the qualifying offer. As for the lower back injury, Flaherty received 2 injections to treat lower back pain earlier this season, and it wasn't too long ago. It was just recently, along with 1 injection for the same issue last season. As for the qualifying offer, he is eligible to receive the 1-year contract, which is going to be about 20, 21, 22 million from the Tigers, but only if the Tigers keep him past the deadline, which would be a risky choice on their end for health reasons. So the qualifying offer, the way that it works is if Jack Flaherty declines the qualifying offer, the Tigers could basically say, okay, here's 1 year, $21 million. You can accept it and come back, or you can decline it and go to free agency. Now, the Tigers would be anticipating that Jack Flaherty would decline it because, again, he's pitched like an ace. He's trying to go get paid in free agency. He's really young. Jack Flaherty's 28 years old. He wants to get paid. So the Tigers would then offer him that qualifying offer. And Jack Flaherty, if he declines that and signs for at least $50 million in free agency, the Tigers will get a draft pick in the upcoming draft between the first round and competitive balance round A. Now, if he declines and signs for less than $50 million for some reason, let's say that teams are really concerned about the back end free agency, and for some odd reason, he isn't able to sign for any more than $50 million. Well, then the Tigers get a pick between competitive balance round B and the third round. So either way, the Tigers are probably looking at a pick if they extend the qualifying offer and Jack Flaherty declines. But again, like, it can be risky for the Tigers because look, like, what happens if the Tigers give Jack Flaherty the qualifying? Let's say they don't trade him, they give him the qualifying offer. And let's say Jack Flaherty knows he has a back issue. And Jack Flaherty says, man, I'm going to get paid now. Let me take my $21 million and I'll get paid now. And we'll see if my back holds up through a full season. That's where the risk comes. And with the Tigers, if they're going to offer that qualifying offer, they need to be confident in the long-term health of Jack Flaherty's lower back, just in case he accepts. And that's where other teams are now concerned as well, because teams are like, well, is his back healthy? Is his back not healthy? That's the biggest question mark. So the Tigers are trying to use the qualifying offer as leverage, telling teams, we'll hold on to Jack Flaherty, because the Tigers are basically going to compare the value of the return with the value of the potential draft pick. So they're using that as leverage. Whereas other teams are saying, well, he's got this back injury. You know, we're not going to give you what you're asking for because this guy might only be able to make one start before he grabs at his back again. Because again, Jack Flaherty has dealt with the back issue twice this season, once last season. It's definitely a concern for other teams. And right now the Tigers are asking a ton for Jack Flaherty.
All right. They should be asking a ton for Jack Flaherty. If you watch the last two damn starts, he's really good. As far as the back injury, look, let's be adults here. All right. First of all, the Tigers know exactly what's the matter with Jack Flaherty's back. They've been treating him for an entire season. Other teams probably had discussions with Baltimore last offseason. Other teams had discussions with St. Louis last year. His back issues are not a mystery to Major League Baseball. In addition, when you're traded, you have to pass a physical. Often, you're asked for medicals before a trade is completed. So, I'm not buying into the back being an obstacle as much as we're discussing, because there are ways to mitigate the fact that he has back issues. I think what you want to know is, can he pitch? And if you're really worried he can't pitch, you can always look at medicals. If your team doctor or your back specialist look at the medicals and then decide if you think he can make the 8, 9, 10, 12 starts, depending if you're a playoff team and he's going to go in the playoffs, he could actually also probably get another shot. So nobody's looking at Jack Flaherty as a long-term solution. They're trying to figure out how to get through the next 10 weeks of baseball, including the playoffs. As far as the Tigers and the qualifying offer, come on, qualifying offer my butt, okay? If the Tigers are interested in Jack Flaherty, the smartest thing they can do is try to get as much as they can for him right now. They're not very good. They're 3 games under 500. They're not going anywhere. They're playing a team that's predominantly AAA players right now and young players. You need to get as much talent as you can onto your roster and into your system. And if they have interest in Jack Flaherty, they can sign him this offseason. So let's put all that to bed. Scott Harris needs to trade Jack Flaherty and get as much as he can. And how Scott Harris is going to be perceived in the baseball community in Detroit has a lot to do with how he handles this trade deadline. He has a valuable asset. He needs to trade it and get something of value. That is his job. Okay. We had a trade deadline last year that was a debacle because he botched it. You can't have him botch it again with his most valuable asset.
Yeah, you can't have Eduardo Rodriguez 2.0. Like, you just can't have that. And then the big question becomes, what else is he able to trade? What else is Scott Harris able to move? Because there are some pieces here that when you look at it on paper, you think there should be able to be some fits for certain guys out there. Carson Kelly, Tigers are shopping him. Mark Canha is on the trade block. Gio Urshela is on the trade block. Andrew Chafin, a reliever, left-handed. Shelby Miller, a reliever, right-handed. They're both kind of floated out there as potential trade candidates, but also they have team options for the 2025 season, so the Tigers could bring both of those guys back. It seems like the Tigers have lumped in Andrew Chafin and Shelby Miller into the mix of their controllable relievers, essentially, because they're under team control through the 2025 season. If they find the right deal for them, they'll move them. If not, it seems like they're trending in the direction of wanting to pick up those team options, especially for Andrew Chafin, but also Shelby Miller's looked pretty good as of late as well after a rough go of things there. He had a tough stretch, but he's bounced back, quite well. But it really comes down, Mark, to Carson Kelly, Mark Canha, Gio Urshela. What are they able to get for those guys? You look at Carson Kelly, he's somebody who's, made a lot of adjustments. He's a quality all-around catcher. He's improved his offense. He's improved his defense, improved his offense by changing his mechanics. He's also, improved his time to contact with the lag of his bat. Also on defense, he switched to a one-knee setup, and he's found, some significant receiving improvement. He's always had the strong arm, but he's receiving a lot better and able to pitch frame better as well. The problem is like when all this kind of started, there were probably 4 catchers on the trade block. Maybe 3 of them were better than Carson Kelly, maybe 2 of them better than Carson Kelly. So like, it's not a guarantee the Tigers are going to find a fit for Carson Kelly because only a couple teams need catchers. So we'll see if the Tigers are able to move Carson Kelly. It's a 242 batting average, 7 home runs, 720 OPS, 8% walk rate, 19% strikeout rate, above average WRC plus at 106. Like, he's done some good things. He's put up some good numbers. He's bounced back. That's encouraging. We'll see if they can move him. Mark Canha, he's been terrible since May 1st. If you look at the numbers, now he still gets on base, which is beneficial. He's really good against left-handed pitchers. So maybe the Tigers are able to trade him off as like a short side platoon option for teams against left-handed pitching. But again, that kind of just reminds me of like what Robbie Grossman was when he was a Tiger. I know the Tigers moved Robbie Grossman, but they moved him for a minor league reliever in Chris England, who's since been released by the Tigers. So like, I don't know how much you really get back for Mark Canha, which sucks because when the Tigers went out and traded for Mark Canha in November 2023, was the first move of the offseason. They traded for him. They picked up the $11.5 million club option. They expected him to impact the development of young hitters with his approach and provide a valuable trade chip at the deadline. And now you wonder, are the Tigers going to be able to trade Mark Canha? And if they are, how much are they actually going to be able to get for him? It's probably not going to be a franchise-changing type piece as they may have hoped for, going back to when they actually went and traded for him with the Brewers. And then you have Gio Urshela, who's also kind of in the same situation, except his contract is just significantly cheaper. Like, he signs a 1-year, $1.5 million contract in spring training, but I don't know if it's a guarantee that teams are going to want. I don't know if it's a guarantee that teams want Gio Urshela. Like, since June 21st, he's hitting well below 200. He used to be a 300 hitter. He's hitting well below 200 since June 21st. His OPS is terrible in that stretch. It's a 31-game stretch of like really, really below average production. He doesn't swing and miss, but he's a contacts first hitter who does not drive the ball for power. And especially this season, he's not making as much contact on pitches inside the zone. That's concerning to me. Sure, he's above average on defense, but at the same time, like, who really wants Gio Urshela? Who really wants Mark Canha? Is there really a market for Carson Kelly? And then you got to trade Jack Flaherty, right? So like, I don't know. Where are you at with these different players, Mark? Like, do you see the Tigers being able to move a Canha, a Kelly, and Urshela, or is it kind of like Jack Flaherty or bust at this point?
Well, I don't think there's any question you're able to move Jack Flaherty for something of substance. I think Mark Canha probably has more value than you're thinking. Mostly probably a lower level wild card type of player. We're going to have to do some research. The at-bat he put on yesterday was a perfect example of what a contender would hope that Mark Canha can bring to the table. Face a tough pitcher, situational hit, came up yesterday, put the ball in play, got a big sacrifice fly at an important time of the game. And, he put a very professional at-bat together this weekend against Minnesota in an important part of the game. And that's pretty much the only reason why you're going to roster Mark Canha as a contender coming down the stretch these last 8-9 weeks of the baseball season. Are you going to get a lot for him? No. I would also say to you, there is not any reliever that I would not be having a discussion about. Holton, Chafin, Foley for sure. I mean, if I'm the LA Dodgers and I think I can optimize Jason Foley to be what he was last year or what he was in April relative to what he is now, you're buying low on Jason Foley. Jason Foley looks like he's broken. He looks like a mess the last month, maybe more. But teams also, really smart teams, Tampa Bay, Dodgers, often teams like the Mets, teams like Milwaukee, they're shrewd. They understand how to optimize players much better sometimes than the Tigers do. Tigers have had some success with some starting pitching. They've had some success with Carson Kelly. At the same time, they got a lot of players of their own that are struggling that are not really getting too optimized. So, yes, you need to see Scott Harris make some moves. I'm a little disappointed it's taken this long to make a move. And I'm hoping he does make a move beyond Jack Flaherty. I mean, you got Dylan Dingler. It's going to cost $760,000 next year. You're going to save $2.7 million that you can put in other resources for the 2025 roster over Carson Kelly. Everybody knows it. They know it. The question is, it's 23 months into it. The only deals Scott Harris has made are basically a giveaway by Milwaukee when they took on Canha's contract in Detroit, and the Soto Vierling trade, which is pretty much nothing. So you're 2 years into it, and you need to see a little bit more risk taking, a little bit more level of aggression than we've seen from the Tiger front office. Am I being unfair?
Mark, have you forgotten about Justin Henry Malloy and Howie Lee?
I've forgotten about them both because, to be really honest with you, it's not really a sterling addition to the resume for either. You got a second baseman who's the third-ranked second baseman in the pecking order in the Detroit system that maybe you're going to trade later. And I never get too excited about guys really hitting well at Double-A Erie. And I got another guy who, yes, he's shown a few flashes this year after 800 AAA at-bats. And we also have a guy in Atlanta who's appeared in 100 baseball games in 2 years that pitches leverage for a playoff team and would be the best reliever in the Detroit bullpen. So before we start saying those were productive trades, I think we have to not look at it from a fan's perspective, and we have to look at it from productivity, realism.
Well, Mark, I'll give you the numbers on Howie Lee. He's hitting .291 with 12 homers, a 9% walk rate, and an 18% strikeout rate in Double-A Erie. I don't know how you can't get excited about that, or at least can't be encouraged by that when that was a move that was made for Michael Lorenzen. Let's be honest here. You can tip your cap. It's okay.
So I'm going to ask you again. I'm going to ask you three things. One, you're so good about pulling up data while we do these podcasts. So tell me what Justice Bigbie hit last year in Double-A.
Don't care about Justice Bigbie right now. I'm talking Howie Lee.
I'm just asking you because he hit like 340, and I just want to know how it translated into Toledo. Because, Justice Bigbie is not hitting 200 at Toledo. He's hitting about 250, 255. But I don't get excited about guys hitting 290 at Erie with, 13 home runs, especially when they're the third in the pecking order of second baseman. So it's nice. I'm really glad he did that. On the list of level of importance that's, somewhere, not on my radar of really caring a lot. When's Lee planning on impacting the Detroit Tigers lineup? Why don't you share that with me? We'll move on from that. All right. How about the Jimenez part? Would Jimenez be the best reliever in the Detroit bullpen right now?
He signed an extension.
Yeah. Okay. You mean you can actually sign an extension? Wow. Holy smokes. You mean you could spend $10 million when you have a $110 million payroll? It's allowed? They do that? You mean sign good players that help you win? That's allowed? I'm so happy that that's allowed. It's been a while. I haven't really see them do that. Would you rather have Joe Jimenez for $10 million or Mark Canha for $11.5 million?
One's a reliever and one's an outfielder. I don't understand the comparison there.
Well, I'm just asking you, who's part of your core and who's impacting games more? I'm just asking you about how you spend your money when you have obviously a budget is important to how it impacts winning. And, that's why we like to have these discussions, you and I. So, all right, let's jump into question 2, the big two. If you had to put a percentage on it What are the chances the Tigers trade Tarik Skubal? I have the same
somewhere, but I'm going to go somewhere between like 1% and 3%. And that's sure how it feels, but we'll see, man. I mean, crazier things have happened. You cannot forget that AJ Preller, the general manager who runs the show over there in San Diego, he's always lurking and he's done some crazy things before. So you can never say never. Mike Elias obviously has the prospects to make it happen with the Baltimore Orioles. But yeah, look, like the Tigers aren't going to move Tarik Skubal unless there is a significant deal on the table that they cannot refuse. Tarik Skubal is the front runner to win the American League Cy Young Award. He's under control for 2 more seasons. Like, he's going to be around. He's also, again, it's a 2.35 ERA in 21 starts. Like, Tarik Skubal is elite. He is the best pitcher in baseball, hands down, no question about it. The Tigers should be asking the moon for him, and they're listening to offers. Like, they are listening to offers on Tarik Skubal. You want to come give him a try, they'll listen. Their phones are on. But barring a return like the Nationals accepted from the Padres in the Juan Soto trade at the 2022 deadline, Tarik Skubal is going to stay in Detroit through this year's trade deadline. There's no doubt about it. There would have to be a Juan Soto-like return for the Tigers to make that move and make it happen. And let's not forget, what happened in that Juan Soto deal, right? It was Juan Soto traded by the Nationals with Josh Bell to the Padres for Robert Hassel III, Jarlin Susana, C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, Luke Voigt, and James Wood. C.J. Abrams obviously being the key piece in that package going back, but like Mackenzie Gore is a dude, James Wood is a dude, Robert Hassel, like that's a dude on the rise. So there are a lot of good players that came back in that deal, and that really changed the trajectory of where the Washington Nationals were heading. And so I think the Tigers can find a trade like that if that comes across their table, whether that's the Orioles paying, a ton of prospect capital to get Tarik Skubal, or the San Diego Padres doing something crazy, or the Dodgers throwing 7-8 players at the Tigers. Like, of course, like they'll consider it, they'll think about it, but just the chances of that kind of an offer coming across Scott Harris's table, very unlikely, and it hasn't happened yet. So I just don't see it happening before the 6 p.m. deadline on Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, Tarik Skubal would help any contender. Again, think about him going to Baltimore, right? Like, Baltimore would have 3 opportunities to win the World Series with Tarik Skubal on their roster. 3 opportunities. So, like, the Tigers are going to ask the moon for him. There's no doubt about it, as they should. But I just don't see it happening. We're looking at somewhere between probably 1% and 5% right now.
So I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. I got 2 questions for you. How many consecutive weeks have we had this discussion?
I don't know.
I got to think it's about 6. Six sounds like a good number. What do you think, my brother? About 6
maybe.
Weeks? Okay. How many consecutive weeks of the 6 weeks have both of us said that there's between a 0 and 1% chance of Tarik Skubal getting traded, while numerous other crazy people in the media, not beat writers, by the way, not beat writers. I don't think beat writers have ever thought Tarik Skubal was getting traded, but lots of other media people like to talk about it, to have something to talk about it. And we have always said there is a 0 or 1% chance that Tarik Skubal will be traded. I told you there was a better chance that Kate Hudson would go on vacation with me than Tarik Skubal being traded. I still stick to that. And I don't think we need to talk about this anymore because Tarik Skubal's not getting traded. If he does, I'll apologize, but I don't think that's it. So, all right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in 60. We're back. I want to compliment you. It's never fun to write endless trade stories. You've done a really, really good job. To try to propose realistic trades from other teams' systems without getting a lot of outside input is a difficult exercise. You've written some really fun stuff. So you wrote a couple of different versions, but mostly one about some mock trades involving both Tarik Skubal and Jack Flaherty with the Baltimore Orioles and the LA Dodgers. So why don't you walk us through what those trades were? You could explain them, and then I'll try to put my spin on what you had to say and maybe add some of my own version to some of that stuff.
Yeah, I know you just got done saying you don't want to talk about Tarik Skubal trades anymore, but here we are talking about mock Tarik Skubal trades. We'll start with Tarik Skubal just to kind of get your take on what you think. So I had the Orioles receiving Tarik Skubal and the Tigers receiving shortstop Jackson Holliday, third baseman, first baseman Kobe Mayo, second baseman outfielder Connor Norby, and shortstop third baseman Elvin Garcia. So look, the Orioles, they have 3 top 100 prospects. Jackson Holliday at number 1, Samuel Basallo, who's a catcher and a first baseman, at number 12, and then Kobe Mayo at number 15. Among those 3, I think Basallo might be the most coveted, but he's probably the most untouchable when you think about the Orioles having, a 1-2 punch of Basallo and Adley Rutschman for at least 3 seasons beginning in 2025. Having Basallo allows them to preserve Rutschman's health, all while they split time at catcher and DH to stay fresh on offense. Makes a lot of sense. The Tigers, though, if they were really to make a deal with the Orioles, you'd have to think they're going to have to get both Holliday and Mayo in that deal. And on top of it, why not Connor Norby as well? Somebody who isn't a top 100 prospect, but he provides a boost in the power department immediately. Offense first, second baseman. We'll see if he can avoid a full-time shift to the outfield. But second baseman, Connor Norby makes a lot of sense to be added into that deal. Also, Elvin Garcia, I found him fascinating. He signed as part of the international market. He's 17 years old, switch hitting shortstop, solid bat-to-ball skills, play discipline, bat speed in the Dominican Summer League. Mark, with this trade, I want to know, do you think it's fair on both sides? If the Tigers were really willing to move Tarik Skubal, which they are if the right offer comes across the table, do you think that the Orioles would be overpaying in this case, going Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo, Connor Norby, Elvin Garcia? Or do you think it's pretty fair on both sides? What would your evaluations be if you were Scott Harris and if you were Mike Elias?
I don't think Mike Elias is planning on trading either Holliday or Mayo. I think if he was, we'd know about it by now. But if that trade was on the table, I think Scott Harris would have to seriously consider it. I think Mike Elias would probably ask for a reliever de jour. Anybody off the Tigers major league roster be added into that. And I think it's viable. That's exactly the composition of a trade that both sides will feel a lot of pain from, which usually means it's a pretty good trade. I mean, it would put the Tigers in a slightly different dilemma in the sense that now you have Rainer, McGonigal, and Jackson Holliday to play the middle of the infield. What a terrible tragedy that would be. Plus you'd have Mayo, who's either a third baseman or a first baseman, so now you might have a glut at first base. But at the same time, you know what the Tigers need more than anything? Really good players. They don't have enough
Indeed.
of them. And
no, I'm right there with you, Mark, and you're spot on. The only thing about that trade is I don't know if Mike Elias would really want to move those pieces. He comes from Houston, right? He built things up with the Houston Astros. He helped build their dynasty. And in Houston, they never traded any of their prospects, ever. I know they did to an extent, right? But they really didn't trade their top end prospects ever. And this would be, this would be, in this case, Mike Elias moving off 2 of his 3 top prospects in Jackson Holliday and Kobe Mayo, and also tossing in Connor Norby and a young player in Elvin Garcia. It's hard to see him doing that. You mentioned, it would hurt the teams on both sides. For sure it would. Let's talk about the Tarik Skubal to the Dodgers trade, though, where the Dodgers acquire Tarik Skubal and the Tigers acquire outfielder Andy Pages, third baseman Miguel Vargas, catcher/first baseman Dalton Rushing, outfielder Jose DePaula, right-hander River Ryan, shortstop Alex Freeland, and outfielder Eduardo Quintero. Now, the Dodgers don't have the same top 100 prospect capital as the Orioles. So if the Dodgers want Skubal, if we were doing a hypothetical trade, they would have to throw a ton of players at him. They don't have the same top 100 caliber prospects. They just don't. Dalton Rushing is their top prospect, and he's, around the 40, 50, maybe 60 range, depending on what site you're looking at, whereas the Orioles have number 1 overall prospect Jackson Holliday, right? So, again, would the Dodgers be willing to throw all those players at the Tigers for Tarik Skubal? Maybe, if they really wanted Tarik Skubal for not only this postseason, but for the next 2 postseasons as well. That's a lot. It's a lot of control. So you'd have to give up a lot to get him. I think the Tigers, getting MLB talent such as Pages and Vargas in that trade, along with River Ryan, a right-hander who would then take Tarik Skubal's spot in the rotation. That makes some sense. Pages fits best in right field. He's got plus power despite some whiffs at the plate. Miguel Vargas fits best at third baseman. We all know the Tigers need a third baseman so badly. He hits for contact. He's a master of the strike zone. And then River Ryan has extreme upside, 4-pitch mix, got a fastball with good induced vertical break. All three of those guys have big league experience. Dalton Rushing, who's a catcher, he's got, real home run potential with plate discipline. We'll see if he can continue developing as a catcher, especially when it comes to the game calling. And then DePaula, a 19-year-old, he signed internationally, quality swing decisions, power potential, needs to clean up the defense. And then Freeland is a switch hitter, better from the left side of the plate, but he projects to stick at shortstop, which gives the Tigers another shortstop. And if they can develop the hit tool, we'll see. Like, again, play discipline is great. We'll see if he can, develop the hit tool, which has improved recently. That would really help the Tigers out because it just adds another shortstop into their system who's going to be able to stick long term. And the more options you can have at shortstop, the better. Because if you look at who they have playing there right now, it's a black hole on most nights, aside from the 3 nights where he homered back to back to back. But yeah, and then Quintero, obviously like an athletic guy, young, 18 years old, advanced on offense. We'll see. But like, that's 7 players for 1 player in Tarik Skubal. Like, Mark, does that even make sense if you're the Dodgers? Like, would Andrew Friedman ever touch the idea of sending those 7 players to the Tigers for Tarik Skubal? And then if you're Scott Harris, are those 7 players, is that enough? Because that's probably the best that the Dodgers could offer.
Well, first of all, that's probably 7 of the 9 best prospects the Dodgers have. And 2 of them are playing 3 of them are now playing in the major leagues, if you include a very interesting River Ryan. So I would say Scott Harris would say yes to that. I would just think it's too overwhelmingly good. They have a reliever at AA now, Hernandez, that throws about 101. I would, see if I can move things around and get him into the trade, even if I had to lose somebody out of the deal. But I don't, obviously, I don't think Dodgers are doing that trade, and it's just way too much in prospect cargo for them to, it's just not the way they do things. So I did, as an offshoot to what you're discussing, and the Dodgers do badly need a viable starting pitcher, had a lot of injuries, but, a Jack Flaherty deal with Jason Foley and Matt Vierling to the Dodgers for Vargas and River Ryan would be something I'd be very interested in. Might not be something the Dodgers were interested in, but I just gave them a viable, controllable outfielder that hits right-handed that they need. They need pretty bad, to be honest with you. I gave them a viable reliever, and the Dodgers have a 5.89 ERA, I think, since July 1st and have blown 2 5-run leads. And I would think they could optimize Jason Foley better than what the Tigers have done this season. And you get Jack Flaherty for the rest of the year, who's also from the area, so you had a decent chance to re-sign him. So it might be a good fit there. I'm not sure the Dodgers do that deal, but it's something I think they think about. It's a really, really good deal for the Tigers. So,
well, let's go with the mock trade of Jack Flaherty to the Dodgers then, now that you mentioned it. And I think the Dodgers could be a landing spot for Jack Flaherty. I mentioned this earlier in the pod. Like, there is interest. The Dodgers have interest in Jack Flaherty. The Tigers obviously have been asking a ton from every team that they've been negotiating with, and that's maybe turned some teams away early on, but we still have a few days left until the trade deadline. So we'll see if, maybe the asking price comes down a little bit and a move is made. But I have the Dodgers acquiring Jack Flaherty and the Tigers acquiring catcher/first baseman Dalton Rushing and shortstop/second baseman Noah Miller. Now, everyone that we've talked to, Mark, this also includes, again, like everyone we've talked to has said that the Tigers are going to get a top 100 prospect for Jack Flaherty. Mike Farron talked about that when he came on the podcast with us and was, chatting with some early trade deadline talk. Dalton Rushing is a top 100 prospect, and I think the move of Rushing for Flaherty makes a ton of sense when you consider the fact that the Dodgers don't really need Dalton Rushing. Like, they have their starting catcher in Will Smith. He's under contract for the 2033 season. Prospect Diego Cartaya is the backup catcher of the future. They love his leadership that he shows in handling the AAA pitching staff. When you look towards the future, he is the backup catcher of the future. And they also have another prospect, by the way, too, who's at the lower levels right now in Theron Lirizarno. And he's an interesting catcher at the lower levels. We'll see if he ends up becoming anything, but I know that they're, again, he's like a fascinating prospect who is a catcher and should be able to stick there. So when you consider the fact that they got Will Smith, they got Carson, and they got a young kid, at the lower levels, I don't know, do they really need Dalton Rushing, or is that somebody that they would be able to move on from? Is he essentially expendable? And I think so. And I think that would make a lot of sense. If we give the Tigers a catching tandem of Dalton Rushing and Dylan Dingler into the future, and then you got Noah Miller. Let's not forget about him. He's, way outside of the top 100, but he's somewhere that the Tigers could pick up. He's outstanding defensively at shortstop. Offense is below average. He draws walks with patience at the plate. Doesn't hit the ball hard. Probably won't ever hit for power. But again, he's interesting because he draws walks and, he can play defensive shortstop. Like, he can hold down the shortstop position. So, Mark, what do you think about that trade? Jack Flaherty to the Dodgers for Dalton Rushing and Noah Miller. Does it work for Scott Harris? Does it work for Andrew Friedman?
I think it works for Andrew Friedman. I'm not so sure it works for Scott Harris, only because you got Dylan Dingler, 26 years old, who hits a 950 OPS in AAA, and he's about ready to play in the major leagues. And I'm not sure if we know how good he's going to be. He's quite athletic, quite good, and he's a little more advanced than Dalton Rushing, probably a better defender on top of it, cut out of the same cloth. And so I'm thinking if the Tigers are making a deal with the Dodgers, they may be looking for a similar caliber prospect, but maybe one that plays a different position, whether it's Justin Robleski, who's now in their rotation, whether it's a Vargas or a Pajes that we discussed earlier.
Or a Josue De Paula.
A De Paula, who is probably their best prospect at lower levels, pretty dynamic player. All of those guys would probably be under consideration. I'm not so sure with the emergence, especially this season and, the last month of Dylan Dingler, that the Tigers are prioritizing catching that much where Rushing would take precedent over these other players. I think, beyond that with Flaherty, if we're going to discuss this, there are other teams that are going to have a lot of interest in Jack Flaherty. I think the Twins are going to have interest. I think Milwaukee has interest. I think St. Louis has interest. All those teams. I think the Yankees probably have some interest. I wouldn't be shocked if the Mets had interest. The Mets are right in the playoff hunt right now.
All right, Mark. Well, let me give you the last Jack Flaherty mock trade then, since we're talking about other teams, because you're right. Like, he could go a number of different places, no doubt about it. The last one that I brought up, though, was the Orioles acquiring Jack Flaherty. A little reunion. Remember, they went out and they got him at last year's trade deadline, and that was an absolute train wreck. But Jack Flaherty, as we know, is a different pitcher than he was last year. He's the best strikeout pitcher in all of the American League, if not all of baseball. How would you feel about the Orioles acquiring Jack Flaherty and the Orioles giving up second baseman / outfielder Connor Norby and outfielder Enrique Bradfield? Just from background there, again, we talked about the Tigers getting a top 100 prospect for Flaherty. Connor Norby is not a top 100 prospect. Neither is Enrique Bradfield. They are both off the top 100, who you combine them both together, and you're probably looking at somebody in that 50-60 range if you were to combine them together. I know you can't actually do that, but in theory, let's just say you combine those guys together, you're looking at a top 50 there if you were to do a standalone. But Norby, Bradfield, again, Holiday's not going in that deal. Basalo's not going in that deal. Mayo's not going in that deal. This is a 2-month rental. But Jack Flaherty is the best rental starting pitcher available on an expiring contract. And let's say the Orioles don't want to give up Heston Kjerstad or Colton Cowser, they probably have to give up a couple guys just outside of the top 100 list. So, Norby makes consistent contact, has game power, provides infield depth with the upside of being an everyday player with pop in the middle of the lineup. Bradfield has elite speed on the bases, elite defense in center field. He's got above average on base skills at the plate, draws walks, limits strikeouts. Again, this guy is a steal machine at the high A level. So you're getting the guy at the AAA level who can contribute immediately. And then you're getting a guy in Bradfield who could be in the mix to be, an everyday center fielder of the future. It's never bad to have up the middle depth. That is not a bad thing. He projects as a perfect leadoff hitter. He can, honestly, he can really add a new dimension to the Tigers offense that's desperately needed. So that's Connor Norby and Enrique Bradfield for Jack Flaherty. Mark, does it make sense for Scott Harris? Does it make sense for Mike Elias?
I think it makes sense for both teams. It's very viable that a deal like that would work for both teams. I'm not a huge Bradfield guy, but I think he adds an element to the system that's important. You do have Max Clark, who is, similar style player, probably a better hitter, but say probably a year behind Bradfield. So, but I still think you need to add talent to your system. And it's because you're adding talent doesn't mean they're going to play for you. They maybe do leverage in other deals. And, the idea is you need to add talent to your system. You never know how guys are going to work out. So, to think they can get the best players they can get. And that's probably the Baltimore would love to do. I'm not sure Scott Harris would say yes to that, but I think Mike Elias would say yes to it. There's, like I said, there's a lot of teams that could use Jack Flaherty. And, it'll be interesting to see, what those teams are willing to do. I mean, some of the teams are slumping. It usually makes teams willing to, pay more things. I think Milwaukee is a good team to be talking to, and we'll see what happens. I mean, so personally, they got to do something. We're going to find out in the next 48 hours exactly what it is. And, speculating about it is fun. I really want to see what they've done, how much groundwork they've laid. We're going to find out really what Jack Flaherty's worth. Let's take a break. We'll be back with some news and some more trade talk. All right, Ev. Riley Greene, injured list again. Tell us what you know. Does it have any relationship to playing center field, do you think, or just general wear and tear? Is there anything to do with stress reaction from last year, or is this actually just specifically located with his hamstring? Tell us what you know.
Yeah, first and foremost, this sucks for Riley Greene. This is a guy who set a goal at the beginning of spring training to stay healthy for the entire 2024 season. He put in a ton of work with his new trainer, Ben De La Cruz, to not only add strength, but to work on some of the finer muscles, to be able to stay healthy, stay on the field, and put in a 162. And he grinded in the first half of the season. He played in all but one game before the All-Star break, and that seemingly caught up to him. He does think that playing center field as opposed to playing in left field takes more of a toll on his body and could have led, to the lower body injury that he's dealing with now, which is the right hamstring strain. Again, he played a ton of left field coming out of the gate. And then Parker Meadows got sent down. And then Spencer Torkelson got sent down. And some guys had to move around different positions. And Justin Henry Malloy came up. So the DH spot wasn't as open. So he wasn't able to, get off of his feet as often as the Tigers would have liked, right? And so those things happened. Riley Greene was raking. Of course, he's going to be in the lineup. But yeah, it's not good. This is his fourth injury in the past 3 seasons. It's his second leg injury in 14 months. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. He landed on the injured list last season. He missed more than a month with a left fibula stress reaction. It sounds like this is not the same as that. This is a right hamstring strain. But nonetheless, having 2 lower body injuries, 2 leg injuries in the span of 14 months is no doubt concerning. And then when you look at the big picture of what this means for Riley too, he's missed a lot of time with injuries. The hamstring strain that he's dealing with right now, it's his 4th injury in 3 seasons, along with the right foot fracture in April of 2022, the left fibula stress reaction in May 2023, and the right elbow sprain, which required Tommy John surgery in September 2023. 2 of those injuries, the foot fracture and the elbow sprain, required surgery. The other 2 injuries that he's dealt with have not required surgery, but he's been limited by injuries. 93 games in 2022, 99 games in 2023, and now 101 games so far in 2024. When he's healthy, he's one of the best players in baseball. He's hitting 264, 17 homers, 51 walks, 109 strikeouts. Riley Greene, he's an all-star. He was an all-star this year because he played like an all-star. But the Tigers have kind of run him into the ground. The Tigers came into this season with a plan to keep him healthy, but instead of giving him off days, he ended up playing in 96 of the Tigers' 97 games before the All-Star break, starting 94 of those 96 games. On top of that, he spent 25 games in center field, even though the Tigers initially planned for him to play almost exclusively in left field. So when he comes back, and he's going to come back, we might be seeing left field and DH only type Riley Greene. No more center field for him, I wouldn't think. And that's the good thing because it coincides with, Parker Meadows starting his rehab assignment. He got that underway in AAA Toledo on Sunday. So he's going to be coming back very soon here. But yeah, it sucks to see Riley Greene go down. It's never a good thing. He's a guy that you want to see on that field as often as possible. But again, like people ask me all the time, like, are they going to extend Riley Greene? Are they going to extend Riley Greene? And my response to that is always, is Riley Greene going to stay healthy? Is Riley Greene a long-term injury risk? It's 4 injuries in 3 seasons. And I understand that he had the fluke injury with the dive, right? Where he, jammed up his elbow and it's a right elbow sprain and need Tommy John surgery. And I also understand that there was like the freak injury of fouling the ball off his foot in spring training before he made his big league debut. And he had to get foot surgery, right? So like the 2 surgeries that he's had, those were kind of freak injuries, right? But then you talk about the stress reaction in the fibula. That's not a freak injury. That's a wear and tear. Talk about the right hamstring. That's a wear and tear, especially the way that it went down, where he feels discomfort in his right leg last Monday against the Cleveland Guardians at Progressive Field. That was the 4th game since coming back from the All-Star break. He sits out Tuesday to rest his leg. He returns to the lineup as the DH on Wednesday and Thursday. He had terrible at-bats in that series, but there wasn't one singular moment. It wasn't like, he was running down to first base and like he grabbed at his hammy because he pulled it. It was like wear and tear over time. That really concerns me with Riley Greene, lower body long-term. And that's why, like, when people ask me extension, I say, can he stay healthy?
I'll be pretty simple about this. And it's taken us 80 podcasts, but how about Mark Goresh will be more optimistic with his answer than Evan Petzold. So for the first time in 80 podcasts, we're going to reverse roles on this. If I said to you, Riley Greene, if I said this to you on the 1st of April this year, if I said, hey, Ev, will you be happy if Riley Greene plays 140 baseball games this year? What would you have said to me?
I would have said for sure 100%. That doesn't mean I would extend him, is what I'm trying to say. But yes, I would be fine with that. That would make sense. That would track.
Right. So if they give him 10 to 15 days off, gets his legs freshened up, comes back and plays well for the last 45 days of the season, finishes pretty decently, 23 to 25 dongs, 860 OPS, 4 WAR. Would you be feeling pretty good about his year?
No doubt about it, but I'd still be praying that this isn't Grady Sizemore 2.0.
No, I get it. But at the same time, we're not stressing over Parker Meadows having a hamstring pull, and we are stressing over Riley Greene having a hamstring pull. So I'm just
2 completely different players.
I get it. I get that there's an injury history there. But what I'm saying to you is I'm just trying to look at the bigger picture. I think part of what happened here is playing center field was probably not great for him. Okay. Probably added some extra stress to his legs. I think you and I have talked about that. You seem to agree with the possibility that may have aggravated his circumstances a little bit more than they may have suspected before.
I didn't say that, but he sure believes that.
Oh, right. Okay. So we'll let that rest quietly. Okay. So I think going forward, what it tells us is that if you want Riley Greene to play 140 games, it's probably a good idea. He plays 20 to 25 of them at DH, 115 to 120 of them in left field. And they do a good job of making sure that he manages his stress level on his legs. And that's just part of what goes on. I don't think a guy that's going to play 100 to 145 games, and if you have to get more out of him, DH him more, is a bad thing. I still think they'll try to do an extension with Riley Greene. And, we don't have to always agree on things. I think your concerns are very valid. I also think he is a core player. He's the center of the Detroit Tigers world, and they need to get him and Skubal both locked up and start building a baseball team here. Or, otherwise we're just a bus station of an MLB franchise. We're just passing through. We're like the Delta terminal, at DTW. Are we serious about having a baseball team, or we just...
Hey, Mark, you remember when I said 2026, 2027? I mentioned that a couple of times on a few different podcasts in the past. It worries me, man. It really does.
I get it. It worries me. It worries me, the people that are actually in charge of building our baseball team and whether they have the skill to do it. All right, it's trade talk time. Let's try to wrap this next few minutes of the pod up. We're not done with the trade talk because you know what? The trade deadline is in 2 days. So what else is there really to talk about? Question. You think the Tigers could trade any of their controllable relievers for controllable position players or different types of relievers, or just trying to add quality, baseball players to their system? And who makes sense getting dealt?
Yeah, I mean, trying to project like a return for some of these guys is really difficult. But I mean, again, like Jason Foley obviously is going through it. He's struggling right now. Does the team believe that they can fix him overnight? If they think so, then Jason Foley is a player that some teams could try to come after. He's a free agent after the 2027 season. Will Vest is a free agent after the 2027 season. Tigers love his slider. I'm sure other teams like his slider as well. He would make some sense. I really think, though, the two that you'd be looking at, and we need to talk about them, is left-hander Andrew Chafin and right-hander Shelby Miller as two guys who are controllable, who could be on the move. The Tigers don't feel any urgency to move a Jason Foley or a Will Vest. And they felt the same way about Alex Lang last trade deadline. Now, the way you look at it now, you probably wish they would have moved on from Alex Lang at last year's trade deadline. But nonetheless, they don't feel a need to move Jason Foley, Tyler Holton, Will Vest. The guys they might be a little bit more willing to move, though, Andrew Chafin, Shelby Miller. Andrew Chafin has a $6.25 million club option, which means he's under team control through the 2025 season. If the Tigers want him, they can pick it up. He's made a compelling case for the Tigers to pick up the option. He needs to maintain his success. But look, he generates strikeouts, swing and miss, and chase, all at elite rates. He is the best reliever in the Tigers bullpen, even though he's not inducing as many ground balls as he used to. He used to be in that like 45 to 50 range. Now he's more in like the 35% range. But the lack of ground balls only becomes a problem if he stops missing bats. Right now, Andrew Chafin is missing bats like nobody's business. So I think he's a great option. Then Shelby Miller, too, could be someone that the Tigers move. So we'll see.
All right, it's time to get out of here. We've gone through enough hypotheticals. I want to remind everybody, expect breaking news to be happening from any time that we wrap this show up. We're planning on doing a show Wednesday. And if something happens, we'll try to figure out how to fit it in here and talk about it. So I want to remind everybody, please rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, pretty much anywhere, especially thefreep.com. You can always find every Days of Roar embedded in every Ever Petzold article at thefreep.com. And as usual, they have some great digital deals if you want to subscribe. I'd like to thank our editor, Free Press editor, Nicole Avery Nichols. I'd like to thank, as every week, Robin Magic Chan, who makes us sound so good and will probably fit in any breaking news if we have some. I'd like to thank my grandson, the spectacular Braden Michael Gorash, and shout out, as always, to Savannah Petzold. We'll be talking to you, hopefully, on Wednesday with an update on what transpired with all the Tiger trades that we're hoping happen. And until later this week, peace!